the
All right,
Media
welcome to the new
Broadcasting
JFK Show
Center.
number 103. I hope my voice is okay. I'm a little under the weather today. We're going to have a tribute to Mark Lane, as we know, one of the legendary researchers of JFK, and passed away last week. Now, before that, there's just a couple of issues. We've been getting quite a few comments, and they wanted to know if it was, they had several people wanted to know if it was Bill Shelley in the photograph with Ted Cruz. And I've talked with Larry about it, and it is not Bill Shelley in the trademark picture in New Orleans. So I promised them I would take care of that.
Well, the figure on the far right, who is usually mostly cropped out, appears to be Michael Payne, the husband of Ruth Payne, where they both, of course, had ties to the CIA, and where Ruth arranged for Lee to have a job at the book depository just 2 weeks before the motorcade. Larry, I'm not aware that Bill Shelley's in that photograph. Are you?
No, not at all. I don't know where that came from. It's never been discussed in our circle of research, and I don't know where that might have come from. So I'm totally unaware of that, Jim.
Okay, well, just several of our people that watch all the time, they made a comment, and I promised them I would bring it up. Now, secondly, I'd like to let everyone know before we go into Mark Lane that Black Op Radio has officially gone on record as saying that the Ted Cruz connection in New Orleans is complete bunk, and that we're just not serious JFK researchers who believe that Ted Cruz was involved in with Oswald in New Orleans. So what contrast?
Gary, I'm a bit floored by that. I mean, you and I and Larry and Ralph, I think we've done a pretty thorough job of this. Obviously, Ted Cruz was there. Judith has affirmed to me in the last couple of days how she had met him there. I mean, I don't understand. Don't these guys believe in evidence?
And then if you want to go on the political side of things, at Sitka, Donald Trump is the worst thing that could ever happen to America. And the only thing that could save us is Hillary Rodham Clinton. So when you want to talk about contrast.
That's pretty bizarre, Gary, because Hillary is a neocon, a hawk. She's going to represent more and more wars. She's going to represent more NAFTA, more free trade agreements. She represents corporate interests, corporations ruling the world. I published an article here in Madison in the Capital Times about the contrast between Trump and Hillary, pointing out that if you took the definition of fascism advanced by Benito Mussolini, according to which fascism is a merger of big government with big business, then fascism can equally be well defined as corporatism. The corporatists want free trade. The corporates want more wars. My argument was there is a fascist in the race, but his name is not Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. So it would seem like one of the most exciting things that happened in a long time was the Ted Cruz story. And over there at Sitka, there's complete hogwash, conspiracy theory, crazy talk. So,
Larry, do we need any more?
You have a clear choice.
All of this came out of Wayne Madsen, to begin with, and he had some very solid research and very solid resources at his disposal. And so I just don't know why, they would not accept this, but then again, they have their motives and and their reason for taking that type of position, and we just move on. I mean, Sitka doesn't move our boat.
Yeah, but what's striking about it, Larry, is here you have an intrusion of the JFK case into contemporary politics. Notice how Ted Cruz disappeared from the scene completely,
right,
leaving most Republicans gasping because they thought they had at least until 7 June to decide what to do about Donald Trump. And all of a sudden, Ted Cruz, who declared he was in it to the bitter end, has just vanished from the scene. And there is no reasonable alternative explanation than that he was given the word by the agency that this story had become too hot.
That's right. The
And the
crown
cool-
jewel. We spoke about this, a couple of weeks ago. The crown jewel could not be touched.
Yeah, that's because we're on the cutting edge of the JFK research. All right, so tonight we have a video that I prepared, and it's probably one of the first videos you'd ever want to watch as far as JFK shows. Now, being seasoned researchers like we are, a lot of this stuff is going to seem elementary, but we also want to realize that he was coming out with it first, and he was taking on the Warren Commission like no one else. So we've got quite a few of his famous interviews, and the first one, which goes along and corroborates some of Larry Rivera's work about the motorcycle activity. And when there's Sam Holland and Lee Bowers talking about the motorcycle that ran up the embankment and flipped over. So if you want to go ahead and play that, we can start that now.
And a policeman towed his motorcycle down in the middle of the street and run up the embankment with his pistol drawn. He was running toward that particular spot. And also another motorcycle policeman right behind him tried to ride up the embankment on his motorcycle, and it turned over about halfway up the embankment. And he got off his motorcycle and left it laying there and run on over to the fence with his gun in his hand.
That's a 40-second with Sam Holland. Now, Larry, you sent that video, so go ahead and talk about that one for us.
Sam Holland and Lee Bowers were interviewed by Mark Lane at the time, within months of the assassination, and they gave their views, of what they witnessed that day on Elm Street. And obviously, they talked about the motorcycle cop going up the embankment. We did the JFK Horseman on this, and with the extensive research combining Beverly Brunson's analysis and articles, newspaper articles that we found published that day that talked about a motorcycle cop running up the driving up the embankment pell-mell style, which means, in a rushed and hurried way, going up there looking for reacting to what he had seen, that was going on the grassy knoll. So, Mark Lane was one of the first researchers to go and independently interview these witnesses. Some of them even before the Warren Commission got to them, but he continued to work on this, well into 1964, 1965. And we'll see, I believe, interviews with Roger Craig, Aquila Clemens. You just saw the S.M. Holland and Lee Bowers interviews, talking about the what we call the Knoll Rider, which we have spoken about, so many times here.
Mm-hmm. Jim?
Yeah, no, I think it's remarkable that Mark Lane was already on top of this issue of a motorcycle escort officer having ridden up on the side of the grassy knoll. I think it's fantastic. It lends not only further corroboration to Larry's work based on the Fred Newcomb interviews, but undermines all of those who want to insist that the Zapruder film is authentic and we have nothing new to learn. I mean, I think it further damages the credibility of Sitka as though it were already at an all-time low.
Sometimes, how low can you go? The answer is further still, quite often. All right, so let's go on to our next. We're going to have Mark Lane commenting on Lee Oswald being in the doorway. So let's go ahead and play that one.
And a policeman towed his motorcycle down in the middle of the street and run up the embankment with his pistol drawn. Before he deserted his motorcycle, at the time of the shooting,
the commission said the man in the doorway was Billy Lovelady. Although Lovelady agreed He also said he wore a red and white striped sport shirt, buttoned near the neck, and no jacket. No commission member ever saw Lovelady. Apparently, no commission member even saw a picture of him. The press was unable to obtain one. This is a previously unpublished photograph of Lovelady, taken by us from a camouflage position. Here is a picture of Oswald at the time of his arrest. Was the man in the doorway Oswald or Lovelady, or neither one? If it was Oswald, that fact alone is proof of his innocence.
Just that one fact alone would prove Oswald's innocence. And after several decades, a lot of hard work by Rouse and Kate and others.
Well, of course. I mean, as we've been emphasizing, if Oswald was in the doorway watching the motorcade, he not only cannot have been the lone gunman, he can't even have been one of the shooters. And it's just astounding to me that Mark Lane is so on top of this already at such an early stage. Larry, don't you agree?
Yeah, well, I'm delighted, that this that Gary, supplied us, because I forwarded this to Ralph St. Kay, and he was ecstatic about Gary's find. And not only was Mark Lane on top of this, like you say, Jim, but a couple of years ago, when Ralph approached Mark Lane to become a senior member of the Oswald Innocence campaign, Mark unequivocally and immediately accepted, saying that he would be delighted to sit on our committee, on our organization, and that he was 100% for Oswald being in the doorway, obviously because of what he had studied, way back in 1964, when he was the first man to go and get a picture of Billy Lovelady. And I was very impressed, because I always wondered how he obtained that photograph of Billy Lovelady, and like the video says, they did it surreptitiously, when Billy Lovelady was not aware of that photograph being taken. So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, his exact words were under camouflage.
Exactly.
All right, let's move to the second slide, just so we can see a picture of Mark Lane in his later years.
I mean, yes, slides. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there's him, and there's two more pictures of him in his later days. And these pictures don't have any particular order other than
slide four, Chance.
Mm-hmm. And he was personal friends and ran the campaign with John F. Kennedy, so that's probably why it affected him so much.
And slide 5.
Mm-hmm.
I want to come back to that slide number 2 after we see this. Who is he speaking with there?
This is just a random photograph off of YouTube.
Okay, go all the way back to 2, because I'm very, very struck by that. I mean, how can we have a photograph of Mark Lane with the young JFK? I mean, that's just fascinating.
He was a campaign manager in New York.
Right. That's right. He was a congressman, actually, let me give you a little bit of background on this. He was a congressman for the district of the Bronx, of the South Bronx, where a lot of the Puerto Ricans had settled, after the mass migration of the late 50s, the mid-50s. And he represented a lot of these individuals, migrants, people who had migrated, pro bono, some of these pro bono, without even, charging them any money, so he built quite a constituency there in the South Bronx, and that's how he was able to start his political career there. And obviously in 1960, when JFK was running, for president, he was one of the people in charge of the campaign there in that area of New York. So, that's very interesting.
That's very impressive. I think any attorney who undertakes pro bono work is a good guy in my book. I mean, that counts for a lot, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's why he never lost an election there.
There you go. And so if you want to go ahead and play the Lee Bowers one, it's the second clip. Can we go backwards, or you just want to go on?
No, Chance.
Where were you on November 22nd? And a policeman throwed his motorcycle down in the middle of the street and run up the embankment with his pistol drawn. He was running toward that particular spot. And also another motorcycle policeman right behind him tried to ride.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, then you have to use that. Gary gave a timeline. I think one of what I sent you, Chance, gave a breakdown on the times, so you could just go to the times. Well, we're not worried about the exact second. If you get it roughly right, that'll be good enough.
Are we on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lee Bowers is 40 seconds to 108, and then pretty much 108 on is Arville Nix.
I have to mention a lawyer's brief, which was the one document that he circulated right after the assassination that refuted all the accusations and all the information that they had against Oswald. And he meticulously, outlined one by one all of the different aspects, and where they had all the supposed incriminating evidence on Lee Oswald, and he enumerated each and every one of these 1 to 15, and then he proceeded to completely demolish all of these
alleged facts.
Yes. About the accusations against Lee Oswald, and to this day, I have to say that nobody has been able to refute any of those.
Right. He said Oswald had no counsel. That was the whole problem. So he decided to provide counsel to Lee Oswald, and the more counsel provided, the more he realized that he was the original Oswald Innocence Campaign.
Now listen, since Chance has this problem, what if we just run through, let's play all the clips, and then we can come back and talk about it.
Okay, just play the whole video and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, Chance, just go back to the beginning and just play the whole thing. What's it run all together, about 20 minutes?
Yeah, a little more than that, maybe 30.
Well, we better play it, because we're getting that.
Yeah, but we don't
And
know.
a policeman towed his motorcycle down in the middle of the street and run up the embankment with his pistol drawn. He was running toward that particular spot. And also another motorcycle policeman right behind him tried to ride up the embankment on his motorcycle, and it turned over about halfway up the embankment. And he got off his motorcycle and left it laying there and run on over to the fence with his gun in his hand. The first one to appear on the scene, other than those who, of course, who were standing around, including two on top of the triple underpass, was one who rode a motorcycle up the incline coming up from the lower portion of Elm Street. And he rode perhaps 2/3 of the way up or more before he deserted his motorcycle. At the time of the shooting,
the commission said the man in the doorway was Billy Lovelady. Although Lovelady agreed, he also said he wore a red and white striped sports shirt, buttoned near the neck, and no jacket. No commission member ever saw Lovelady. Apparently, no commission member even saw a picture of him. The press was unable to obtain one. This is a previously unpublished photograph of Lovelady, taken by us from a camouflage position. Here is a picture of Oswald at the time of his arrest. Was the man in the doorway Oswald or Lovelady, or neither one? If it was Oswald, that fact alone is proof of his innocence.
Mr. Nix, where were you on November 22nd, 1963?
Standing on the corner of Main and Houston.
And did you take any pictures of the presidential limousine as it went through Dealey Plaza?
Yes, I've taken pictures before and after, before the assassination and during the assassination.
And you know, of course, that your pictures were eventually used by the government to determine where the limousine was when some of the shots were fired.
Yes.
And did you deliver a copy of your film to the federal government?
Yes, I delivered a copy of my film to the federal government about December the 1st.
About a little over a week after the assassination.
Yes, my film got lost in the processing plant.
Where is the original film?
The original film belonged to United Press International. The government has a duplicate copy.
And where is that duplicate copy?
In the archives.
And is that the duplicate copy which was used by the Warren Commission for the purpose of determining, along with other films, the Muchmore film and the Zapruder film, where the presidential limousine was when some of the shots were fired?
I would say so.
Well, you now have a copy of your film, which you were kind enough to show to us this afternoon. Is that copy the same as the original which you gave to the FBI on December 1st?
I would say no. There's some films maybe missing, some frames. Some of the frames were ruined.
Does the film which you have at the present time have the same number of frames as the film which you delivered to the FBI on December 1st?
I would say no, but it's because of losing maybe a frame here and there.
At the time the shots were fired, did you look at the book depository building?
No.
Did you think at that time that the shots came from the book depository building?
No, I thought it came from a fence between the book depository and the railroad track.
Did anyone else who you know, who you've spoken with, also believe that the shots came from there?
Most everyone thought it came from the fence behind the book depository.
Did you have occasion to speak with Forrest Sorrells, who was, of course, a friend of yours, and the Secret Service agent in charge of Dallas that day?
Yes, I did.
Did he tell you where he thought the shots came from?
He thought they were coming from the same place.
Which is?
Behind the fence.
At the present time, where do you believe the shots came from?
Well, they came from the book depository because there's proof that it did come from there.
I see. This you've read in newspapers and you've read the report?
Yes. I believe the Warren report.
The Commission also stated, as you know, Mr. Holland, that the same bullet which hit Governor Connally first struck President Kennedy, based upon what you observed from that position just above the street on the overpass. Is that possible?
No. No, that Warren Commission is in error on that. Because I was an eyewitness to that. And I know that the same bullet that hit President Kennedy did not hit Governor Connally. The first bullet, the president slumped over, and Governor Connally made his turn to the right and then back to the left. And that's when the second shot was fired and knocked him down in the floorboard. And it would have been impossible for him to turn had the bullet hit, the same bullet hit him that went through the president's neck.
And did you see the effect of the next bullet which struck President Kennedy?
I saw the effects of the next bullet that struck the president because it flipped him over almost on his stomach and the side of his head, and his head was laying on the edge of the seat. He was laying more on his stomach, and his foot was hanging out over the car, edge of the car, upside down.
Mr. Mr. Bowers, what is your present occupation?
I'm Vice President of Lockwood Meadows Incorporated, which is a real estate land development company.
And where were you employed on November 22nd, 1963?
At that time, I was employed as a tower operator for the Union Terminal Company.
And where were you at about 12:30 that day?
I was at the south end of the terminal of the tower building, rather looking down toward the terminal and observing the motorcade as was everyone else in the area.
Could you tell us what you heard and what you saw from about 12 noon until the time that the shots were fired?
Well, for some time that morning, since perhaps 10 o'clock in the morning, we had the area pretty well sealed off, and the policemen had been stationed on the triple underpass as well as other strategic corners in the area, so that there was very little traffic moving into this area at this time. This is a dead-end area which is used primarily for parking. After 11 or 11:30, there was practically no movement in the area whatsoever. However, about 12:10, give or take 5 minutes, there was a car which entered the area and probed around for some time. This car was a 59 Oldsmobile station wagon with a out-of-state license. It was muddy as if it had just come in off of the road from some area where it was a red sandy area. It was occupied by one male who spent 3 or 4 minutes in the area looking it over, and then, as he found out, left by the entrance, which is the only way in and out of the area at that time. Not too long after that, perhaps 5 or 6 minutes, a car of a totally different description, also occupied by one male, entered the area. Now, this man performed a similar action, and he toured down around the area, probing to examine the exits, and seemed at one or more occasions to have a mic or something resembling such an instrument up to his face. Just a few moments after that, the third car came into the area, and these were the only 3 cars that entered this area during this specific period. The third car was a 61 or 2 Chevrolet. This car was muddy all the way up to the windows as if it had just come in off the road. It had an out-of-state license identical to the first car of the series, and it also had political stickers on it, which were not only for the same candidate, but were identical in nature and color, so that they appeared to have been from the same group. This car was occupied by one male who spent a little bit more time in the area than the others, and probed down by the side of the tower where I was located. I could not state that these cars left the area entirely, because after they got back onto the extension of Elm Street in front of the school depository building, they were lost to my vision, so that they could have remained very close by.
Where do you think the shots came from?
Well, I know where that third shot came from.
Where did that shot come from?
Behind the picket fence.
Is there any
close to the little plaza?
Is there any doubt in your mind that that shot came from behind the fence?
There's no doubt in my mind. There's no doubt whatsoever in my mind in the statement that I made in the sheriff's office immediately after the shooting, and the statement that I made to the Warren Commission. I made it very plain there was no doubt in my mind. There was definitely a shot fired from behind that picket fence. I made it plain to the Warren Commission, and I think I made the same statement in the sheriff's office. There was a fourth shot.
On November 22nd, Mr. Holland, did you tell the sheriff's office in an affidavit you signed that date that you saw a puff of smoke come from behind the picket fence?
I am certain I did.
Was it the general feeling, would you say, Mr. Holland, among the police officers and others, at the moment that the shots were fired, that at least one shot came from behind that wooden fence?
There's about 6 or 8 of us boys from the Union Terminal run around there to find some evidence that there was someone around there. Certainly the ones that was with me that run around that fence realized what was happening. They told me the same thing that I told you, that there was definitely a shot fired, and they saw the smoke. We just all started running around that fence as a unit.
Where were you on November 22nd, Mr. Dodd?
I was standing on the underpass, Commerce Underpass in Dallas, Texas.
Were you there alone?
No, I was along with 3 friends of mine.
Railroad men?
Yeah, all railroad men.
Mr. Holland was one of them.
That's right.
And did you see anything which might indicate to you where the shots came from?
Well, we all 4 seen about the same thing. As the shot, the smoke came from behind the hedge on the north side of the plaza, and a motorcycle policeman dropped his motorcycle in the street with his gun in his hand and run up the embankment to the hedge. And then I went north to look around the corner to see if there's anyone behind the hedge, and met Special Agent of the Katy Railroad, and he went down there, and I walked along with him to see if there were any tracks there, in which there were tracks, and cigarettes butts were laying where someone had been standing on a bumper, looking over the fence or something.
Were you questioned by agents of any government agency on November 22nd, Mr. Dodd?
Yes, we were. We were taken over to the courthouse and questioned by, I suppose, Secret Service men of some kind. And they asked me quite a few questions, about the same as I've told you men here today.
But you were never called as a witness by the Warren?
No, I never was called.
Because here's the Warren report, and in the index your name is not listed, and there's no reference in the whole 888 pages to the fact that you were up there and you saw what you saw, you heard what you heard.
Well, I don't know about that. But there was something that looks to me like that going on there, that somebody should have found out something. A man walk up and shoot a man handcuffed to a couple of policemen and get away with it. Why, I figured there's something else that's going on besides what it should be.
We are in Mesquite, Texas, in the home of James Leon Simmons, a car inspector for the Union Terminal Railroad. Mr. Simmons, how long have you been employed by the Union Terminal?
I've been employed by the Union Terminal 11 years.
Were you a witness to the assassination of President Kennedy?
Yes, I was standing on the Elm Street overpass at the time of the assassination.
Were you there alone or with others?
There was a group of employees from the Union Terminal at the time, and 2 Dallas policemen.
What did you see, and what did you hear?
As the presidential limousine was rounding the curve on Elm Street, there was a loud explosion. At the time, I didn't know what it was, but it sounded like a loud firecracker or a gunshot. And it sounded like it came from the left and in front of us, towards the wooden fence. And there was a puff of smoke that came underneath the trees on the embankment.
Where was the puff of smoke, Mr. Simmons, in relation to the wooden fence?
It was right directly in front of the wooden fence.
I show you a picture published by the Warren Commission as Commission Exhibit number 2215, which is a view of the Triple Underpass area. I ask you if you'd be good enough to mark with this pen with an X the area where you thought the shots came from and where you saw the smoke?
It was this area here.
After you heard the shot and saw the smoke, what did you do?
I was talking with a patrolman Foster at the time, and as soon as we heard the shots, we ran around to the wooden fence. And when we got there, there was no one there, but there was footprints in the mud around the fence, and there was footprints on the wooden 2x4 railing on the fence.
Were you questioned by the Dallas police on that day?
Yes, I was.
Did you give your name to the Dallas police?
Yes, I did.
Did you tell them what you've just told me?
Yes, I did.
Were you subsequently questioned by agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation?
About a month later, I was questioned by the FBI.
Did you tell them what you told me and what you told the Dallas police?
Yes, I did.
Were you ever called as a witness by the Warren Commission?
No, sir, I wasn't.
This is the Warren Commission report. Back of it has an index of every person who is referred to by the Commission. Is your name present there?
No, sir, it isn't.
You think it's rather curious that you had such a fine view of the whole Dealey Plaza area, and you were among those who saw smoke coming from evidently behind the fence, and yet you were not called by the Commission as a witness?
Well, I always thought it peculiar, but I thought that's the way they did business.
It wasn't but about 30 seconds till the presidential motorcade rounded the corner of Main Street to turn over onto Elm. But right after the presidential car had turned the corner, I heard these three loud noises when I jumped behind the concrete abutment, which is between Main and Commerce. There was a motorcycle policeman that just stopped his motorcycle up by the monument and had drawn his revolver and was racing up the hill to the left of him. There was a deputy sheriff, which I think was stationed under the underpass, Buddy Walters. At this time, I says, I felt something sting me on the face as I was standing down there. I said, just sting, and Walters looked at me and says, yes, says, you got blood on your cheek. He says, where were you standing? I says, well, down by the underpass. So we started walking down there, and when Walters got about, I'd say 10 feet away, he says, look there on the curb, there was a very visible mark on the curb where a bullet had struck. Either a fragment of the bullet or a piece of the concrete had flew up and scratched my face. And he said, go to the city police headquarters and make a statement, which I did.
Mr. Tagg, this is a picture of Dealey Plaza, as you know. I wonder if you'd be good enough to show me where you were standing when you heard the shots.
I was standing at the east end of the triple underpass between Commerce and Main. There's a little concrete divider there. It's about 3 feet wide.
And, sir, could you indicate where the bullet struck the concrete curb?
The bullet struck the curb on the south curb of Main Street. It would be right here.
And at the time that you first heard the shots, what was your impression as to the origin of those shots?
My first impression was that they had come from the left of me.
Would you indicate on the picture where that would be?
Up in this area here towards the hill.
Where in relation to that wooden fence?
Well, somewhere towards the wooden fence.
Mr. Tagg, on the 22nd, when the shots were being fired, your first impression was that they came from the area near the wooden fence.
That's correct.
Where do you now think that the shots came from?
I believe that they did come from the school book depository because of the things I've read about, the evidence which has been brought forth in the newspapers and through the Warren Report and so on.
We are in the basement of the Terminal Annex building on the northeast corner of Dealey Plaza. We're here with Mr. J.C. Price, the engineer in charge of the building. Mr. Price, where were you at the time that the presidential motorcade drove through Dealey Plaza?
Well, I went up to the roof and where I'd get a better view of the cabin.
Is this where you were sitting on November 22nd, Mr. Price?
Yes, sir.
Right here?
Right here on this spot.
And where did you think you heard the shots come from?
From behind the overpass over there, triple overpass. That's where I thought the shots were coming from.
And where did you see the man run?
Over behind that wooden fence, past the cars, and over behind the Texas Depository Building.
Did you give that information to the Dallas Sheriff's Department on the very day of the assassination?
Yes, I did. I'd say in about 30 minutes after the assassination.
Were you ever called as a witness by the Warren Commission?
No, sir. No, sir.
I show you this map published by the Warren Commission of the Dealey Plaza area and ask you if you would mark on it where you thought the shots came from.
Yes. Yes, sir.
That's just behind the wooden fence where it joins the overpass. Is that correct?
That is correct.
We're now here more than 2 years after the assassination. Now, where do you think the shots came from on November 22nd?
Well, I can't be sure. It seems that from all information that's been gathered that the shots came from the Texas Boat Depository, but I can't hardly believe that. Although I never did look over there at the building, but really I think the shots came from that direction. It seems that everything pointed to that fact that they came from the Book Depository building, but I can't buy that right now. That's about it.
Mr. Grimm, where were you on November 22nd, 1963?
I had taken my 5-year-old son downtown to see the presidential parade.
This is a picture taken by Mr. Nix of the limousine at the time the shots were fired. Do you see yourself and your boy in that picture?
Yes, sir, this is myself and this is my son on this frame here where the first shot hit the president. I would say that he was possibly 30 feet away when the first bullet struck, moved a little closer, and was possibly 20 to 25 feet away when the second bullet hit.
Did you see the effect of the bullets upon the president?
When the second bullet hit, there was the hair seemed to go flying. It was very definite then that he was struck in the head with the second bullet. And yes, sir, I very definitely saw effects of the second bullet.
Did you see any particles of the president's skull fly when the bullet struck him in the head?
I saw a piece fly over, in the area of the curb where I was standing.
And in which direction did that fly?
It seemed to have come left and back.
In other words, the skull particle flew to the left and to the rear of the presidential limousine.
Sir, whatever it was that I saw did fall both in that direction and over into the curb there.
You were a ranger during the war, correct?
Yes, sir, I was a ranger during the war. Took part in the invasion of France and was shot a couple of times. So, as I say, it's possibly like swimming. I hadn't heard that sound for many a year, but you don't forget it once you've heard a shot rounding, coming close to you.
Immediately after the shots were fired, there, of course, was mass confusion, to put it mildly. But the area was immediately sealed off by, I would say, at least 50 police within 3 to 5 minutes. The first one to appear on the scene, other than those who, of course, who were standing around, including 2 on top of the triple underpass, was one who rode a motorcycle up the incline coming up from the lower portion of Elm Street, and he rode perhaps 2/3 of the way up or more before he deserted his motorcycle. At the time of the shooting, in the vicinity of where the 2 men I've described were, there was a flash of light, there was something which occurred which caught my eye in this immediate area on the embankment. Now, what this was, I could not state at that time, and at this time I could not identify it, other than there was some unusual occurrence, a flash of light or smoke or something which caused me to feel like something out of the ordinary had occurred there.
In reading your testimony, Mr. Bowers, it appears that just as you were about to make that statement, you were interrupted in the middle of the sentence by the commission counsel, who then went into another area.
Well, that's correct. I was there only to tell them what they asked, and so that when they seemed to want to cut off the conversation, I felt like that was, as far as I was concerned, that was the end of it.
Mr. Bowers, how many shots did you hear?
There were 3 shots, and these were spaced with 1 shot, then a pause, and then 2 shots in very close order, such as perhaps almost on top of each other, while there was some pause between the first and the second shots.
Did you tell that to the Dallas police?
Yes, I told this to the police, and then also told it to the FBI, and also I had a discussion 2 or 3 days later with them concerning this, and they made no comment, other than the fact that when I stated I felt like the second and third shots could not have been fired from the same rifle, they reminded me that I wasn't an expert, and I had to agree.
We are at the Lewiston Raceway in Lewiston, Maine, with Mrs. Nancy Hamilton, owner of the Hamilton Stables. Mrs. Hamilton, did you testify as a witness before the Warren Commission?
Yes, I did. On June 2nd, 1964, I have been a freelance investigator for various police departments, district attorney's offices, such as the Sacramento District Attorney's Office, Suffolk County, Massachusetts District Attorney's Office, Boston Police Department, and various private detectives.
And before that, were you employed by Jack Ruby?
Yes, I was. This was in 1961 in Dallas at his club, the Carousel, and I was bartender, waitress, and rather the manager there.
All right. I guess we'll stop right there. We're running a little short in time. That was Ruby. Wait. Yeah, she worked for Jack Ruby. That was Nancy Hamilton. So we only have a short period of time, so would y'all like to comment on the video we just watched?
Well, I think you did a great job of putting these clips together, Gary. I think they're sensational, and I have no idea what the naysayers about film alteration, the motorcycle escort, the stopping of the limousine, the alteration of the film can possibly say to respond to this very interesting mixture about the motorcycle riders. I mean, there are just a whole host of issues that seem to me to contradict the position of the disloyal opposition, if I might put it that way. Larry.
Well, the mainstream media, who, and I'm going to say, mention the Chris Matthews of the world, the Rachel
Maddow.
Maddow, and the Peter Jennings, who's not with us anymore, and on and on and on, who have totally ignored, Mark Lane's work, who from the beginning was right on top of everything, and it's just, incredible, Jim. That the mainstream media continues to propagate, this crap, and push this,
The more and more convinced I become that Rachel Maddow, Chris Matthews, and Lawrence O'Donnell are all simply left-wing gatekeepers like Noam Chomsky. They don't want the truth to come out. They're ignorant. They've never studied the case. They're either ignorant or they're deliberately and maliciously covering up because the evidence is simply overwhelming. Chris Matthews, I guarantee, still believes Lee Oswald was the lone demented shooter. Rachel believes 19 Islamic fundamentalists hijacked 4 aircraft and brought us the atrocities of 9/11. They all believe the hoax of Sandy Hook and the Boston bombing. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, we're way beyond all that. Now, what I found most interesting was the Orville Nix interview. Now, if anything proved film alteration, it was that clip for 5 minutes. He was saying that, they lost a frame here, there, they've ruined a few, edited here and there. What else do you need? I mean, it's right there. The Nix film, heavily altered, and just right there, incredible clip.
How can you lose a frame here and there? And as Larry was observing, they took apart the camera so it couldn't be used for a reenactment. I mean, that's so blatant.
No, and not only that, UPI kept the original film for 25 years until the contract expired, and then our good friend Robert Groden again comes up in this story and went in and picked it up. Was sent by the Nix family to go and pick up the film, from UPI, and then all of a sudden, there were even more frames that were missing, Jim. So that's a long story.
Well, see, Groden, it's nice for Groden to be the emissary to go pick it up because then he can go through it and clean it up, tidy it up before he turns it over to the Nix family.
Yeah.
I mean, this becomes so blatant, Larry, the role of this guy. He's a miscreant. He's an absolute duplicitous. I mean, I have many choice words to say about Robert Groden that the FCC won't allow me to say on
there. Yeah.
But Gary, you did a great job of putting those clips together. That's fascinating stuff.
I just wanted to mention in closing, I think I mentioned it earlier, but when Mark Lane wrote this lawyer's brief in defense of Lee Oswald, it was something, that he just took everything apart, step by step, piece by piece, and to this day, nobody can refute, everything that he set forth, in that brief, and it was a totally acceptable legal document, that he would have probably set forth in any trial, where he complained, that Lee Oswald was never afforded or any legal representation, the way that Lee kept insisting, that we have the assassination.
Let's put it this way, Larry. Mark Lane was ahead of Jim DiEugenio, Robert Groden, Josiah Thompson, and a host of others when it comes to discovering the truth about the assassination of JFK. There is no doubt about it. And this brief tribute of ours only immeasurably enhances his standing in my mind as a true seeker after the truth who wanted to gain some modicum of justice for JFK.
And more important, Jim, the legacy of Mark Lane is one that's going to be indelible, and is going to be studied by historians, for many, many decades and years to come. And perhaps not in our lifetime, we will see this, but Mark Lane has left a tremendous legacy, for all of us to follow.
Gary, you did a great job putting this together. Take us out, my friend, with your own closing words.
The thing that impresses me the most is that we tend to think the cutting edge things like Oswald in the doorway, Z-film alteration, and this is back in what's the year, Larry? 67, 64, 65?
Well, Rush to Judgment came out in '64, and he immediately started. Don't forget that Marguerite Oswald hired him to be legal counsel, to Lee Oswald, posthumously, after he had died, and to have his voice, him in a way represented before the Warren Commission, and that was a pain in the ass, for the Warren Commission because they didn't want him near any of the proceedings.
What a great choice! What good judgment.
Okay, well, the JFK Show and the OIC campaign does mourn the loss of our probably most prominent member, and I do feel we'll have more shows in the future about that. And we do have a show with John Hankey in the works about Gary Webb. So this has been the JFK Show number 103. We'll see you next week.